Usually check spam, but I didn't see any. But then your email address wouldn't
Amazing, right? Totally.
light up at me either.
Right.
Bags, so she's coming back.
I know, me too. I gotta hit my car over here. It's not me in my car. It's my tires on it, and I can't. Please push it. I'm trying to get the number for my parents for roadside assistance for my insurance, but they have no idea where it is. I think I tried it on myself too. I can put it in another phone, so.
Make your phone do that, Bill.
It's okay.
I just got
It's
That's true. I forgot it.
just
No, that's okay.
so I use it for recruitment at traveling.
Yeah.
I need to go back the other way.
It's an app called Clock.
Yeah.
That's supposed to good, my dream. It's gonna be fun.
It's straightforward. All right, so come back. So now we have opportunity for questions and discussion. And as always, we encourage questions, especially from people who are new or relatively new. And I think that's all I'll say. So it's the ball's is in your court. Yes.
I was wondering if there's any tips for dealing with physical pain while doing meditation.
Oh, yeah.
So after a certain period, I always end up with some really severe back pain.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering ways to kind of help cope with that to not have it completely disturb the meditation.
Yes. So the question is tips for working with physical pain. And the experience was, as the meditation went on, sort of increasing low back pain, and hope that the tips might lead to pain not completely disturbing the meditation. That's about right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is a really rich area. And I think the one thing to note is that if you have pain that arises during meditation, then you have the opportunity to experience pain in the context of meditation. And we often, just in our daily lives, we have pain all the time, and often experience it in the context of we're really trying to do something else, or we're trying to not hurt, or whatever. And so when pain arises in meditation, we have the opportunity to have that experience. And one thing to keep in mind is, and I think this is important, is the concept of capacity. so it depends on the practice you're doing, but most of the time, say in the context of calm abiding meditation, we're basically training our minds to maintain sort of calm, present awareness. And it's easy to see that our capacity to do that is not unlimited. Like even when circumstances are going perfectly, it's a challenge. So one thing to be, as you bring your attention in your meditation to the pain, which it would be the first instruction, is just be aware of it, is to not think, oh, I have to just sit here and endure it. And, and no matter what happens, I just have to sit here. If you try to do that, you'll have, I think, an experience that's sort of like, that's the hell realm, right? Like you'll immediately, they say the hell realm is a state of mind. Well, the state of mind is the pain's getting worse and I just have to sit here and take it. If that's how you're relating to it, maybe good to notice that, but then to immediately look at moving in a way that feels better. And I guess that's the most simple instruction, is that when pain arises in meditation, you simply allow it to arise. And if you notice that your attention is going away from the object of your meditation, say you're doing calm abiding with an object, then if you can, bring your mind back to the object of your meditation. That's usually the first thing to try. So if it happens again, you can try again. If it seems to really be dominating your attention, good to notice that. But if you think, maybe I'm worried I'm actually harming myself, or that some damage is being done, I think that if you are able to maintain your awareness and use that awareness to move in a way that feels better, that's an extremely good practice. Because the problem with pain, or I think the most common thing we experience is if we start to experience discomfort, we immediately try to move in a way that, before we even looked at it actually, we'll try to avoid it. Maybe even if we think it's coming, we're like even unconsciously moving to avoid it, right? And there's nothing in particular wrong with that. However, well, there is something wrong with it. What's wrong with it is that we have not brought our full attention to what our experience is. And so often the moves that we make are actually counterproductive. And so I think the practice with pain, when you're off the cushion, is to try to bring your attention to it in a kind and gentle way. And then, at least in my experience, what follows is it's some attempt to move in a way that feels better. But then that movement occurs in the context of attention and your full capacity to see what's going on. I think practicing, well, how to say this? I think most of the time, my own practice is to just move in a way that feels better. But every once in a while, I like to give myself the opportunity to experience what it's like if I don't do that. Just out of curiosity, I guess. I will say it's a humbling experience. It's amazing the impact pain can have on your state of mind and your attention. I think that's all I want to say. I'll check in with Bill and Dora on the subject.
That's pretty good. Just to maybe reinforce one of your points, this session that we do here is long.
Yeah.
And we might rather, if we had the space, break it up with some walking meditation or something. And so the idea of setting your own sessions, if you kind of know that you're comfortable sitting for 20 minutes, don't make an hour session. But if you have an hour, make a 20-minute session and then make a break and then make another 20-minute session or something like that. So, thinking ahead in that sense. If the pain is basically coming from the fact that you're, maybe sitting longer than you have the capacity. So but then of course there's so many other things about pain where sometimes pain will be, if it's pain that's not really related to the sitting, but maybe just being triggered by it or you're just noticing it, but if the pain has, sometimes it will have stories attached to it and things, and so then that's a whole other realm, and makes things kind of even more challenging, but also provides opportunity to see how the interaction between our thoughts and our physical sensations and how they kind of snowball each other sometimes, and trying to, let go of these layers, let go of the stories. This is not the time to determine whether I think I have this disease or that disease, or when I'm going to make my next appointment or who I should, this is not during my meditation session. Have another time for that, and to really, so sometimes it's hard just to even let go of, or if we're worried about some condition that we have or that this is connected to. So those things are quite something to work with. But in any case, not injuring yourself. The practice is not meant to injure us. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
I have just one piece. I think where you started out is like, do not start by declaring yourself in jail. So that's, don't set things up in that way. One of the ways that we actually subtly do that is by expecting a kind of relief that's sustained. That is, that by getting something, we want to go back to some kind of stable situation. It wasn't really stable, it was just okay, but it was all kinds of situations continuously. And then something else happened that we want to go back to stability. But when something arises, we can actually discover a capacity for freedom, sort of moment to moment in that experience. And we may overlook the profundity of that while we're hoping for going back to what we thought was this tolerable, stable condition. So that the practical instruction involved with this would be to relate to your experience in very brief moment-to-moment segments, so that you can actually see what's going on, where you really are actually in contact with the experience, where you really are noticing, oh, there's the aspect of the immediate impulse, and then the story, and then the doctor's appointment with a doctor that you don't really like, and the whole, all, but you get to see the pieces of it, but then just returning back to be able to be just with the experience for a few moments. And seeing something in that, then it's actually possible to have some confidence that we're not actually trapped. We're not actually trapped. But to use the practical approach of, no, actually, I don't have to just, I'm not stuck with this. So if it's possible to adjust your posture, if it's possible over the long term, in the case of the back or knees or whatnot, if it's possible over the long term to develop a more refined understanding of our body and what where we're strong or stiff or weak or all, and find some guidance for adjusting posture, adjusting how we sit. Those things, those are sort of long-term things. One of the things that we tend to overlook in sitting practice is that just sitting up straight, so to speak, is actually something we very rarely do. So then we sit up straight, and this is like doing an exercise that we never do. This is like running 2 miles when we can barely make it around the block. So there's something to look at there, just in terms of how we carry ourselves day to day, hour to hour, in terms of our posture. So there are many pieces of it, but don't start out with the idea, I'm in jail.
Diane, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what to Bill's ideas. Meditation is actually a really good treatment for pain. Chronic pain can be a very powerful practice. I mean, it's a practice none of us asks for, but if you've been given it...
If you're lucky enough to get it.
I mean, it's a hard practice, but it can be a very powerful practice.
Mm-hmm.
So you just shouldn't see meditation in terms of causing pain, but it actually is very powerful in relieving pain. And having been through 100 and some appointments with different doctors and physical therapists and all this stuff, my treatment is basically meditation. So don't forget that.
Yeah, so I just want to, I'm going to say that again for the streaming, so Diane's just making the point that meditation is also an extremely powerful practice and treatment for pain also, and it's putting in a plug for if you do have a lot of pain to work with, that it can be an extremely powerful driver and of your practice. Is that a fair statement?
Not just a driver of your practice, that it can be, but also a main tool in your practice. I mean,
So
what do you look at?
Both the driver
when you
of
look,
and
you look at
yeah.
your pain, because that's what's most prominent in your life sometimes.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and
Yes.
kind of just to segue, that's John Kabat-Zinn, a physician who started the mindfulness-based stress reduction idea, working with I think starting off with veterans and chronic pain, now that's become, you know, it is definitely a treatment for pain, and it's used by many treatment programs, just chronic pain treatment programs in the area too.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most common, that's been the most widely disseminated approach of sort of bringing meditation into pain practice. Actually, Diane pointed me towards a book called Dissolving Pain, which is written by a neurofeedback researcher who I think has sort of pinpointed what it is about meditation that makes it effective in pain treatment. And I've even been giving it to some of my patients who have a little bit of experience in meditating. And my favorite story is a patient with really terrible, crippling chronic pain of unclear etiology came back 2 weeks later after trying this, and she said, well, I don't like it because I can make pains that are like a level 4 or a level 5 disappear, but it doesn't work for like 6 through 8. And I said, wait a second. Don't you think it's kind of miraculous that you're just listening to a CD and doing the exercises that are in there, and you can make pains that are pretty significant just vanish? Like, you don't think that's something? And so we concluded that maybe it was an issue of capacity, and she should continue to practice and see if she could become proficient enough to work with higher levels of pain, which she has. So, the compelling thing about this book is two things. One, which Diane told me, is you don't have to read the book; you can just listen to the CDs and do the exercises, and it works, which is
True.
Which is good. You know, it's good if you're not an intellectual type. But actually, the book actually has a very coherent explanation for what's happening that I think is consistent with sort of what we're taught in the Dharma, and it's also compelling because you can tell this neurofeedback researcher just sort of stumbled on it. It probably has the most overlap with Dzogchen practice, but he just kind of stumbled on it and figured out how to utilize it.
And I don't think there's a big problem with using meditation together with medication. I mean, it's not necessarily that this is an either or. I mean, for most of the time, you may be able to handle your pain with meditation, and when you do have that day where you've got a 6 or an 8 pain, which is a significant pain, then yes, you can take your medication, and that might enable you to relax enough that you can get back into your meditation wing of the cures or of the treatment. So it's not really an either or.
Yes. So, yes, Deborah.
Erik, you mentioned a certain kind of practice, Dzogchen.
Dzogchen, yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Totally unqualified to talk about that. Well, just to say that Dzogchen is a to grossly oversimplify it. Dzogchen is a practice from the Nyingma tradition, which is kind of in the same vein as our Mahamudra practice. But they have it's a different practice, but ultimately, presumably, if you accomplish one, you accomplish both. Yes.
Are you satisfied?
Thank you, Erik.
If you have a particular dissatisfaction, and you can put your finger on it, then follow up.
Well, it's okay. I can read about it a little bit, ask better questions.
I would add one piece to it. In the thing that both the Mahamudra practices and Dzogchen have in common is as you go along, as you go out of the starting blocks, they may look like they're sort of doing different kinds of things in different orders, but a lot of it is actually the same thing, but in slightly different orders, or approaching it from one side to start out with, or as opposed to the other side. So some of that looks different, but the point where it actually is kind of relevant to this situation is actually in being able to relate directly with experience, kind of the completely unfiltered settling into experience.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my question really was, how is it most related? Because you said it's most related to the practice of using meditation with chronic pain. So I guess that's what kind of, I wondered how, and maybe, so Bill, you're saying that direct experience is...
So from the point of view of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, chronic pain is just another experience. It's just another appearance that arises.
And goes.
And goes, arises.
Thank you.
I had a question. So on the vein of pain, I was curious if any of you differentiate in how you would treat physical versus emotional pain. Mm-hmm. If the advice would be similar, or if it would be different, or if there's even a differentiation between the two.
So the question is if you would approach or treat emotional pain differently from physical pain, and then wondering if there even is a difference between the two. Is that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when Diane told me about this book and I read it, I realized that I was using the technique that he was describing as useful for physical pain with emotional pain. And I have some physical pain to work with, but in my work, I'm often in the presence of a lot of somebody else's physical and emotional pain, and often it's difficult to remain present in those situations. So I've been wondering also, I was like, my patient that has learned to work with progressively higher levels of physical pain said that she doesn't like doing the practice because now she's having all of these emotional symptoms. And she has what must be a horrendous trauma experience, and she just doesn't have any particular interest. She sort of tried various kinds of talk therapy for 20 years, and she's like, okay, I'm done with that. So she doesn't really want to relive the experience. Interestingly, she said, I don't want to talk about it, is what she said. Interestingly, that's what her body and her mind are offering her. They're offering her the emotions disconnected from the story. So she's actually getting what she's like, I would like to not have to deal with this anymore, but I don't want to talk about it. So she's actually being given all of the emotions disconnected from the storyline. So I think it's a really, really interesting question that's probably better resolved experientially than someone telling you. But in terms of, would you approach an emotional pain differently from a physical pain? At its most simple level, the approach is the same. Because emotional pains, actually, if you look closely, you'll find that your whole life is driven by avoiding emotional pain of even minuscule proportions. Like, it's ridiculous how it just sort of steers you around through your whole life. And so absolutely the first instruction is before you start to do something about it or react to it or move away from it, can you actually experience what it is? And if you can, often the next thing that arises is some insight in how to move in a way that's feels better. But that insight then is grounded in the actual experience, rather than what we're usually reacting to is the fear of that experience, or just a sort of a sideways glimpse that causes us to move in another direction. So that's sort of if you can experience it, that's the best. The other ways of addressing emotional pain, though, are you can also try to transform it. So maybe you can't directly experience what it is. But the practice of Tonglen is designed to allow you to work with it and it's a practice of basically transformation. So if you're familiar with the practice, it's you breathe in whatever pain or suffering is arising in the form of black or dark smoke. And then you breathe out. Equally important is you breathe out your wish for the relief of that suffering or anything positive that you can connect with in that moment. So there are definitely other ways, but of course you can use Tonglen with physical pain too. So I think not so different, but again, better to learn that experientially than as somebody tells you. Yes, Dora.
Well, I just add that I agree with everything you said. That emotional pain, a lot of times, how do we know we have emotional pain? It's usually by, at least a big piece of it is, I feel like this little unrest here or wherever. And so a lot of our practices, I haven't ever, we don't tend to go to analyze your problem and solve it that way. It's much more, the practices go to the direct experience doesn't mean describing it in an abstract way, and so it's more really just moment to moment. Where is that experience? What is that experience? Looking at that experience. And so a lot easier way to start, at least, is working by intentionally looking at where is that emotional pain in my body. And so it becomes similar to physical working with it. But there are, I think it's a good point, there's probably other dimensions to that, and how that may unfold could have some differences, but it does have some similarities.
I want to kind of expand we've been talking about pain and suffering. And this is kind of the top of our list of what we want to get rid of, and then we say yes please when we're offered more pleasure and good stuff, and that's on our agenda, is how to get a lot more good stuff. But if we look at it's easy to see how we don't want to be trapped by suffering. But if we really look more deeply, the notion of being trapped by the the ping pong game of going back and forth between pleasure and pain and going back and forth. We also we have to look at all our experience, and it's actually in a certain way much more challenging to look at pleasure.
Nobody ever asks, how do I work with
Pleasure.
pleasure?
I find myself so trapped by pleasant experiences that I need to put an end to that.
We should ask.
But we should ask, because we actually have to expand the panorama of our practice to encompass all experience, and also the kind of the wide panorama of stuff that just falls into not interesting, boring. Let's get back. Oh, there's some suffering to run away from. Oh, there's some pleasure to run after. Boring. So there's between the chasing after pleasure, the running away from pain, and the kind of just the vague tinge of irritation with all the rest of our experience that's just doesn't measure up. It's not good enough. The whole panorama really has to come under kind of within the scope of awareness. And this is when we look in this way, then the whole range of practices look like I see how it fits together. Just we can think of, I'm paying attention to my breath, I'm paying attention to this aspect of physical experience, I'm cultivating this ability, and then I think, well, that's great because I feel a little bit more calm now. All right, okay, that's the whole point. But being able to actually rest with any domain of our experience then allows us to begin to rest with more and more dimensions of our experience, more and more domains of experience, including, and with the body, tactile sensations are much more stable. If we really try, if we could put our attention on the flow of thoughts or the flow of emotional flows, but this is like trying to rest your finger on a fly. Our tactile experience, when we really get down to it, is just as much of a fly as anything else, but we have a convenient fiction to start with that is actually kind of stable, so we can start with that. But all of these things, and even at the very beginning, just the working with the domain of physical experiences, the tactile experience, what we hear, what we see, what we smell, what we taste, all these different things, just being able to see that it's not all glued together. There's some kind of space in that. And that's one of the things that's very often we talk about that fairly frequently when we talk about how to rest with, how to work with emotional experience. What you mentioned in terms of, there's the physical aspect, there's what feels like more just kind of the movement of emotion. There are the stories that go along with it. These aren't all one thing. And being able to actually have deeper insight into that, being able to transform it, being able to shift with some intention, shift the context is another dimension of it. Being able to actually step outside our own personal experience and not just think of our own personal experience, but think of the experience of others. That shifts and transforms our relationship. And going deeper to be able to actually rest straight into the nature of the experience, to actually see that the finger and the fly are not separate. Then we go on. Then we're kind of off into the dimension of Dzogchen and Mahamudra. But all those pieces really come together, and so I'm saying this in partly sort of to inspire myself and others to kind of take seriously the kind of all the little pieces of the practice, that they have much more potential than it really appears right at the offset. But fortunately, right at the offset, it can also make sense and also seem very useful.
So we have just a minute more. Let's
Oh,
see.
go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead, John. You
No, I
don't-
just had a
you don't
real
talk
simple
very
question. It's
often,
not deep or anything, although I'd love to follow up on the finger and the fly. You mentioned, I think, podcast every day Zen. Is that
Yeah.
right? So I just was curious because listening to podcasts is something I do now. Are there any favorite Buddhist podcasts that the teachers or folks here have, like that I could do a top 5 list? Anybody besides that?
Against the Stream can sometimes be good. That's the Dharma Punks down in California.
So that's against, Marcy's saying against the stream is Dharma Punks, is that what you said?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think if you look up Against the Stream,
Yeah.
they have some good ones. It's kind of hit and miss, but they've got some good ones.
Joan Halifax's group in Santa Fe, I'm blanking on what they call Upaya. Upaya is consistently really good.
Is Ken McLeod's Unfettered Mind, is that a podcast? Or
Well,
is
he hasn't been posting much in the last year,
Yeah.
but historically it's been outstanding.
Yeah, he has
And he has-
tons of.
And he has a bunch of, yeah. If you go to his
teachings.
website, you can download the things still. And they're all indexed too.
I think I might be down for right now for a few days. I was looking in the middle of the night last night. So it's a good time to listen.
All right, let's end on that note.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Okay.